You're someone with a vision for your practice, for your side hustle, and for your personal journey. But when it comes to establishing your path on how to get to where you want to be with your practice, things get a little messy. You're also someone who'd prefer to go in person instead of to groups and listening to everyone else's story. To me, it sounds like you could benefit from one-on-one consulting with our experienced practice of the practice consultants. From $5.95 a month and up, you can work with a consultant that will give you more direction and practical tried and tested tips matched to you and your goals. For more information, visit practiceofthepractice.com/apply. Again, that's practiceofthepractice.com/apply. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 1175. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast. I'm so excited to have you here with me today as part of this series that we are doing, the Better Mental Wellness series. You know, mental wellness, that term I love because I named my practice after that. Mental Wellness Counseling, mentalwellnesscounseling.com. That's the practice that I sold in 2019 to Nicole Ball, one of our clinicians there at the practice, and she has taken it to a whole different level than I took it or wanted to take it. For me, I was really digging the kind of consulting side, the podcasting side, the helping people grow their practices, and was less interested in implementing a lot of those things in my own practice. And so to have Nicole be able to take that off, mental wellness, that's something that I believe in. And I view that as something that we all, whether we're therapists or therapists that are helping people, can benefit from. So this month, we're going to be digging into your mental wellness and also the mental wellness of your clients and having all sorts of different lenses that we're looking through in regards to mental wellness. And so that's where today's episode is at. And we're going to be talking about a few concepts that I'm really excited to talk about. We're going to be talking about backdraft. We're going to be talking about burnout. We're going to be talking about the difference between fierce and tender self-compassion, which let me tell you, I'm excited for that one because not that I need tons of permission giving, but the boundaries that I routinely have to set with my co-parent, I think I need to have even more self-compassion around just how that is. You know, I've talked on this show a little bit about my situation where I became an unexpected single parent a number of years ago and have 90+% custody of my kids. I love my daughter so much, and there's a lot of self-care and self-compassion that I just have to do. Even today, you know, at the time of this recording, I know that it's going to go live in March, but at the time of this recording, it's, you know, November, and there's a lot of dead plants outside, and I had an hour between podcasts, and I could have checked email. I could have done something, quote, productive, but I decided to go outside and do some yard cleanup and to cut some of the dried out flowers and put them down by the road for them to get picked up. And that actually was like a mentally challenging thing I had to do for myself, to say, this is something that's been on my mind, to do a little bit of yard cleanup. Didn't get to it this weekend. They're coming through to pick up stuff. And I had to do something that for me felt like self-compassion. It felt like something that I knew I needed, in the same way that, you know, sometimes we need to sleep in on the weekend a little bit, and that's not being lazy. That's what our bodies are saying we need. And that's why I'm so excited to have Kristin Neff, who is an associate professor of educational psychology at the University of Texas at Austin. She's a pioneer in self-compassion research, conducting the first empirical studies on the construct over 20 years ago. She's written several best-selling books on self-compassion, including Self-Compassion, Fierce Self-Compassion, and the Mindful Self-Compassion Workbook. She also runs the self-compassion community at selfcompassion.org. That's self-compassion.org. Kristin, welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Thanks, Joe. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I am really excited to have you on the show and for you to just make me feel good about the choices I'm making.
Well, I love your little story of self-compassion in everyday life, of saying, you know, tending to my garden is what I need right now. We often say the quintessential self-compassion question is, what do I need right now to be well? And you did that. So that's great.
I love that. What do we need right now to be well? Yeah. How do you see people balance that in a way that maybe doesn't serve them well? Like, what are those mindsets that we've either been given through families of origin or society or our own trauma? Like, what are what are you seeing are kind of the things we have to undo before we get into some of the positive things we need to move toward?
Yeah. So, well, if you just kind of break down, the root of the word self-compassion. So, passion means suffer, calm is with. So, basically, how do we show up for ourselves when we're suffering or when things are difficult? And unfortunately, not that for most people, the answer is we aren't very helpful to ourselves, right? We tend to
Mm,
criticize ourselves. We tend to go into freak out mode. Or we kind of stiff upper lip it. We can't really show up for ourselves if we aren't able to be with the challenge in front of us with some kind of spaciousness and some resilience. Um, and it's not just our culture. Our culture, first of all, doesn't encourage us to do but it's worse. It's actually evolution, because evolution designed us to respond to any sort of personal threat with the fight, flight, or freeze response. And when you make a mistake or you're overwhelmed or something's difficult in your life, we feel personally threatened in a way we don't actually when our good friend has some mistake they've made or some challenge. So we have fight, flight, or freeze reactivity, but we turn it inward because often the problem is inside of us. We fight ourselves, we criticize ourselves. At some level, we think it's going to make us feel safer, be more in control, or we flee into a sense of shame and isolation, kind of imagining the perceived judgments of others, or we freeze and we get stuck and we ruminate, and we can't do anything because we're just overwhelmed by the difficult feelings. So this is again designed by evolution in order to be very useful when a lion is chasing you. Not so useful when you just maybe said something you regret, or or having some stressor in your life. So it's natural, again, evolution and culture doesn't help us either. But the nice thing is, the good news is we actually can learn to relate to ourselves in a more friendly, supportive way. There's a ton of research showing that it can be done and it makes a world of difference.
yeah, I think that it's like when I think through the mulling it over, the shame spiral, the things that we replay in our head, you can see how, if you lived in a dangerous situation, whether that's a tiger or a war zone or something like that,
Yeah.
playing and visualizing those things will get you to a safer environment most likely. And so it
Yeah.
does serve us, but then that idea of it feeling like it's actively helping us, but actually it's not. I
Yeah.
love that you start with that and that you point that out right from the beginning.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. Another good example of this is how we parent our children, right? You mentioned that you're a father. So if you really want your child to act quickly and comply, you can be a very harsh disciplinarian. You can even threaten some sort of, corporal punishment, and you will get your child to, act quickly to listen to what you say. But you're also going to have all these really negative unintended consequences. Like your child is going to become afraid of failure. They're going to be so overwhelmed with anxiety that they might get in trouble, that they won't be able to perform at their best. They'll become more disconnected from you, right? We know that as a parent, we want to have clear boundaries and expectations for our children, but we want it to come from a place of love, not hate or fear, right? We want that child to know, hey, I'm here for you. I believe in you. How can I help? And we know that supportive, encouraging attitude is ultimately going to allow your child to achieve more than saying, if you don't do this immediately, like you're grounded for life, or worse. And so we can kind of see that with our children, yet we don't see it with ourselves. And the impact's just the same, right? So if we show up for ourselves with kind of unconditional love, in other words, yeah, we may make a mistake and that mistake can be rectified, but it doesn't mean that we're a mistake. The bottom line is we are acceptable being a flawed human being, just as we are. But we want to change. We want to grow. We want to reach our full potential. We want to be healthy and well because we care and we believe in ourselves. And this is really important. We're willing to ask ourselves, what do I need to be well? And actually do something about it. And so again, a ton of research shows that more encouraging, supportive attitude in the long run is more effective than just, screaming at ourselves, shaming ourselves, calling ourselves names. So it kind of works short term, but it doesn't work well in the long term.
Mm. Well, I want to start with those terms of fierce and tender self-compassion. How would you break those down?
Yeah. So, tender self compassion is the power of acceptance to alleviate suffering. And so again, just to back up, compassion is defined as concern with the alleviation of suffering. And there's different ways we can go about it. One is through tender self-compassion, which again is the power of acceptance. It's more about accepting ourselves, the mess that we are, the flaws and all the mess that life is, kind of accepting that life's going to be difficult. We're imperfect. Everyone's imperfect. This is the human experience. Whereas fear self-compassion is about taking action to alleviate suffering. And that might be more about changing behaviors or changing situations that are unhealthy. So tender self-compassion might be about kind of validating ourselves. It's hard right now. Asking ourselves like emotionally what we need to care for ourselves. It's this, again, this nurturing quality that helps us feel calm and soothed and supported. And the fierce self-compassion in terms of taking action might be standing up for ourselves, speaking up, drawing a boundary, saying no, and changing something, either our own behavior that's not helping us or saying no to someone else's behavior that's harmful to us, right? Actually spending time to meet our needs. For instance, as parents or as professionals, let's say you're a clinician, there's always going to be some kind of conflict between your needs and other people's needs. And so it's just a matter of saying, I'm not just going to give myself away. My needs count too, not more than other people's, but at least as much as other people's. So how can I come up with a win-win solution? And that's more the realm of fierce self-compassion. It's like yin and yang. We need both. One without the other is incomplete.
Mm. Well, it's like I have a friend who has been in a pretty toxic work situation, and that person, as a friend, is someone that I support and validate, and they kind of say my feelings are valid, but there's a certain point that I can tell is coming, where that individual is going to need to leave the job and take that kind of fierce self-compassion of saying, this is not an environment that I'm going to keep putting myself into. And whether it's a job or a relationship or a friendship, it can be hard sometimes because I think there's all sorts of narratives that we bring into that. And I'm thinking about, I was raised Catholic, did K-12 Catholic school. A lot of the message I got, whether intentionally or unintentionally from my parents, was when things get tough, you put your head down, you work hard, you get through it. And they're kind, loving people. They gave me lots of hugs, and my dad's a psychologist, my mom's a nurse. And it's like, they were very loving. And the message I got was you kind of put your head down. And so even as I reflect on why I stayed in a really unhealthy marriage for so long, or, other things, it's that my go-to is when things get tough, I can muscle my way through it. What are other common maybe mindsets that get in the way of this fierce self-compassion to take some action, and to move on things, when we know we should, but maybe we aren't actually doing the action?
Yeah. And so, well, I think what you're talking about, you really have to bring in values into this. So, for instance, self compassion, one of the research findings is that it is linked to grit, that stick to itness. But we want to have grit, we want to have stick to itness um, in order to stand up for our values, not when the situation is contrary to our values. So let's say you are in a relationship that's not healthy or a workplace that's not healthy. If it's going against your values, just like sticking it out, sucking it up, it's actually not self-compassionate. On the other hand, when things are difficult, but staying with it, it supports your values, or doing the hard work, whether it's, social justice work or anything else difficult in life, doing it because things are in line with our values is absolutely an act of self-compassion. So we really just this is where we need to turn inward and just ask ourselves again, what do I need? What do I value? What's authentic for me? And this is let me tell you, one of the reasons self-compassion is so good for this is because the feeling of self-worth that's linked to self-compassion is unconditional, right? In other words, we're worthy just because we're flawed, imperfect human beings doing the best we can. You don't have to get a graduate degree to be worthy of compassion. It's our human right. It's kind of embedded in our very humanity. On the other hand, something like self-esteem, it depends. We're either good people or bad people, depending on usually, how attractive we are, how successful we are, how much other people like us. And especially when our sense of self-worth is contingent on other people's approval. This is where we really start to get, out of touch with our values. Oh, other people, they won't like me if I say no. or they won't like me if I speak up. I don't want to make waves. And so that kind of leads to more inauthenticity. But when you know that, hey, my worth is unconditional. I can't lose it. It just comes from being a flawed human being. It allows you to take risks. Yeah, maybe they won't. Maybe other people won't like me as much, but I'll like me. Where does
Mm.
my worth come from? Is it really outside of me, or is it intrinsic to my very nature? And that sort of intrinsic self-worth leads people to be able to be more in touch with their values and actually ask themselves, is this worth fighting for or not? And really deciding for yourself. No one else knows.
Mm. Something always comes up when you're running a private practice. Well, Gusto's payroll and HR services can make it a little easier. Gusto was designed for you, the small business owner. They take the pain out of running a business, automatically calculating paychecks, filing payroll taxes, setting up open enrollment. Gusto does it all. Want more? Time tracking, health insurance, 401k, onboarding, commuter benefits, offer letters, access to HR experts. You get the idea. With Gusto, you can focus on the joy of running your business. It's super easy to set up and get started. And if you're moving from another provider, Gusto can transfer all the data for you. It's no surprise 99% of businesses said the value they get for Gusto is worth the price. And here's the best part. Because you're a listener, you get 3 months totally free. All you have to do is go to gusto.com/Joe. Again, that's gusto.com/Joe. I'm telling you, you're going to love Gusto. Get started today. Now, you have a term that you, in the research, have used called backdraft. Tell us what that is and how therapists might see this play out with their clients.
Yeah. So you might think of self compassion as opening your heart to yourself, right? Allowing yourself to kind of be moved by our own suffering. There's actually three elements. There's mindfulness, like kind of being aware of some of the pain that's there, um, responding with warmth and kindness and support, and then a sense of connectedness, realizing that this is the human experience. You aren't alone. Now, sometimes when we open our hearts to ourselves, sometimes we can feel soothed and comforted and strengthened, and that's great. But sometimes when we open our hearts to ourselves, we immediately remember all the conditions under which we weren't loved, when people didn't treat us well, all the pain we've been holding inside of ourselves. We open up the door of our heart, and the old pain rushes out. And so the term backdraft is actually a firefighting term. If a house is on fire, the firefighters don't just fling open the doors, because the air will rush in, ignite the flames, and the flames will come rushing out. You can kind of feel that way with self-compassion practice. So for everyone, so your clients and yourself included, sometimes, when there's a lot of maybe old trauma or just a lot of old pain that people have gotten through just by numbing themselves out or shutting themselves down, opening the door of your heart can have that come rushing out. And the important thing to remember is it's not a bad sign, it's a good sign, because that pain will never heal unless it sees the light of day. I think most therapists know this. That's part of the job of a therapist. And so it can be really helpful to explain to clients that backdraft is normal. If they start opening their heart to themselves, these uncomfortable feelings are likely to arise. It's a good sign. It's not a bad sign, but it is a sign that maybe we need to go safely, especially for people with a trauma history. Maybe you just need to touch the pain with self-compassion, like open the door a little bit and then close it and kind of titrate the amount in a way that feels safe. So I'll give you an example that might be useful for a therapist. So one really effective way to practice self-compassion is physical touch. We know through physiology that if you put your hands on your heart or your face, or you actually give yourself warm, supportive touch, it's just like, when your parents used to touch you, it activates the parasympathetic nervous system. It actually sets the stage for self-compassion. But sometimes if people have trauma associated with their parents' touch, or, they've got some other history where the touch doesn't feel safe, putting your hands on your heart is actually not self-compassionate. You're just kind of re-traumatizing yourself. So finding something else you can do, maybe petting your cat, hugging a teddy bear if that's not too ridiculous for you, but petting your cat, taking a walk. In other words, caring for yourself some other way can be very useful. So the research on the therapeutic process actually is suggesting at this point that all therapy, the outcome of good therapy, is self-compassion. That's kind of what therapy is, helping people to have compassion, understanding for their own trauma, their own wounds, helping them to be more supportive to themselves, kind of internalizing the supportive, understanding voice of the therapist, taking that dialogue internally so people can help guide themselves. And so as a therapist, being aware of backdraft, they might get mad at you. Backdraft sometimes manifests as anger or anxiety or grief, or who knows how it comes out. But just knowing, okay, this is normal. It's a good sign, but it means that I need to help my client work with this backdraft skillfully so they aren't so overwhelmed. And then whatever creative ways you want to do that, you can do.
Now, a lot of therapists, are thinking about or talking about burnout, and I know you mentioned some of that. If we kind of take this conversation away from the therapist thinking about the client and more actually on the therapist as a person that can have more self-compassion and think about their own burnout, what's the research pointing to? And then also, what are some techniques that they can employ to work on their own burnout?
Yeah, well, the nice thing is that working with the exhaustion and kind of feelings of burnout that can come from listening to people's difficult stories all day and being a good therapist that helps your client learn self-compassion are one and the same. And that's because of how the human brain works, right? We've got specialized neurons called mirror neurons and whole portions of the brain that are evolved to feel the emotions of others. So if you're an empathic therapist, you can kind of resonate with what your client is feeling, but they're also resonating with you. And this all happens at the pre-verbal level. It doesn't go through the thing of talking about how you're feeling, although that's also one way to communicate. But at the pre-verbal level, we can actually feel what other people are feeling. And you're feeling your client's emotions, but they're also feeling yours. So when you give yourself compassion as a therapist, your client can actually feel through their mirror neurons your compassion, right? It's actually resonating within them. So, for instance, let's say you're burnt out and you're tired, and maybe you're having hassles with insurance companies, and you're overloaded, and you're seeing too many clients, and you're just kind of exhausted. Yeah, you're a professional. You're not going to tell any of this to your client. They're going to kind of feel it through their mirror neurons at the nonverbal level. But if you actually give yourself compassion for, I am feeling so exhausted, or this is just so much, and like kind of, oh, what can I do to help? And kind of that warm, friendly, supportive attitude toward yourself, then you're communicating that to your client. So let me give you an example. We have research on this. We have a lot of research showing that self-compassion practice by professionals, whether you're a clinician or a healthcare professional, that it helps reduce burnout. One of the practices we do is called breathing compassion in and out. Very simple practice. As you're with someone else who's in some sort of pain, you breathe in compassion for yourself, for your own empathic pain, the pain you're feeling by resonating with your client's pain, or also the pain you're feeling from like the stress and the responsibility, maybe the exhaustion of the cumulative pain. So you breathe in for yourself, for your own pain, and then you breathe out for the other person, your client or your patient, for their pain. If you don't breathe both in and out, you will die. Maybe that's an extreme way of putting it, but you also need to have compassion for yourself and other people in order to be, have your heart fully open. So you can just imagine on the in-breath, you're breathing in for yourself. On the out-breath, you're breathing out for your client. If you feel like you need a little more, you can focus mainly on the in-breath. If you feel like you want to be outward focused a little more, you can focus mainly on the out-breath. But as long as there's some recognition that you are part of the circle of compassion, If you cut yourself out of the circle and you're just focusing on your client, then you're actually disconnecting a bit from their humanity when you disconnect from your own humanity. But by kind of opening that circle, having the compassion, like the waves of the compassion ocean flowing inward and outward, it actually, well, it does two things. First of all, it helps your stress levels. It helps reduce your burnout. It helps you reduce the things that come with burnout, things like depersonalization, which can happen when we just start caring a little less, because the caring feels like it's exhausting. It's, by the way, this big movement. It's not compassion fatigue. It's not, the problem is not too much compassion. The problem is too much empathy. It's empathy fatigue. So compassion for yourself and your client actually reduces those feelings of burnout. So you can actually help regulate your client's emotions by regulating your own emotions. This is a really cool thing about how the brain works.
And what's the research say in regards to outside of session, some habits that therapists or just people in general outside of work that they should be doing to help themselves with self-compassion?
Yeah. So really the best time to practice compassion, to show is whenever suffering is present, right? So in other words, it's all about how do you show up for those difficult moments. So whenever you're feeling stressed or you have that thought or you're feeling badly about yourself or there's, something going on in the world, that is really the best time to practice compassion. Whether that's, I would say, in or outside of the session, but certainly outside of the session. A lot of people talk about reducing burnout through self-care, getting sleep, getting rest, taking walks. Self-care is great. The more you can do it, the better. But self-care isn't enough. We really, when you're freaking out because your child just got in a car accident or whatever, whatever's happening, that is the time to practice self-compassion. So just being aware of, am I suffering? Am I in discomfort? And again, suffering feels like such a big word. Sometimes it's more small, like irritation or just kind of ill at ease. Whenever you notice any sort of negative thoughts or emotions or even physical sensations, just taking that as an opportunity you can bring in the three components of self-compassion. The first is mindfulness. It's being aware, oh yeah, this is hard or this is uncomfortable or stressful or whatever you're feeling. Remembering that you aren't alone, that this is actually what makes you human. It's, it's part of the human experience. You aren't alone. And then bringing some kindness to yourself. That might be physical kindness, like putting your hand on your heart. It might be something like taking a nap or doing your gardening, right? That might be an expression of it. It may be saying some words like, I'm here for you. I won't abandon you. I care about you. Kind of, words you might say to a good friend and just turning them inward. So these are all things that can be done. It's free. It's not difficult because we already know how to do it for others. So we don't have to learn a new skill. We just have to give ourselves permission to use the skill we often display for others and use those skills inward, resource ourselves.
So awesome. Well, the last question that I always ask is, if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
That really the practice of self-compassion is the number one gift you can give your clients, right? So first of all, through embodying self-compassion, if you are a loving, connected presence when you are in your office working with clients, that's going to benefit your client. It will also benefit you, but that's just embodiment is huge. Modeling, to the extent that you can not only model compassion for your client, which you probably think about, but if you model self-compassion, that's a huge gift to everyone. And just really remembering that, self-compassion is not selfish. Like the more that flows inward, the more we have available to flow outward. If you just give compassion to your clients and not yourself, your cup will run dry. But by allowing it to flow inward, then your cup will runneth over for yourself and others.
So awesome. If people want to read your books, if they want to learn more from you, join your community, tell us about that.
Yeah, so I've tried to make it really easy for people to learn about self-compassion. My website, which is self-compassion.org, just Google it. You'll find me easily. You can take, or your clients can take the self-compassion test. You can find out empirically where they score on the self-compassion scale. I have a lot of free practices that you can download or your clients can download. I've got written exercises. And then I've got a lot of books. I've got 5 books out right now, including a book on teaching mindful self-compassion, which is designed for professionals like therapists. And then finally, I started the self-compassion community, which is I've got live events with me, and like I just had Tara Brock on this weekend, and Dan Siegel and Schwartz is going to be on. So I talk with other self-compassion experts. I've got a practice toolkit, and also mentor sessions. So maybe you have a client you think could maybe benefit from learning self-compassion. This is something it's very inexpensive ways that they could resource themselves, and that will also probably facilitate the work they do with you in sessions.
So awesome. Well, Kristin, thank you so much for being on the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure, Joe.
Well, so far this year, we had January as our Even Better Year series, where we talked about all sorts of things to help this year be small steps in the right direction. Last month was Marketing Month, where we were discussing marketing, growing your practice, and this month is Better Mental Wellness. So we're taking steps in the right direction. We're joining you on this journey. We want to help you. If you want to be a part of any of our memberships and you have a private practice, whether you are just getting going, maybe you have a solo practice and you don't want to add a clinician, maybe you want to add a clinician, or maybe you already have a group, we have a track for you over at practiceofthepractice.com/membership. That's the best place for you to go to learn more about our memberships. And we couldn't do this show without Gusto, who is our sponsor for today. Gusto helps with all of your payroll, your time tracking, health insurance, 401k, onboarding, commuter benefits, so many different things to make your private practice run smoothly. And the best part is that you get 3 months totally for free just because you're a listener of this show. Head on over to gusto.com/Joe. That's Gusto, GUSTO.com/Joe. It's who we use here at Practice of the Practice, and we love it. Thank you so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.